Welcome to It's Settled, the Amitros podcast. Each episode, we're going to dig into the humanity in workers' compensation and insurance claims, exploring the stories of injured people and those who support them, as well as the good work professionals are doing in the industry. And now, I invite you to join me, Sean Dean, General Counsel at Amitros and the host of It's Settled. Now, it's settled. Let's get on to the episode. We're doing a podcast with Dr. Claire Muselman, and let's just go right into it. Super hard-hitting questions. What are you drinking? What's your beverage right now? It looks like it's a Dunkin' Donuts.
It is.
Yes, I got it.
I started working with Tina Perney, who used to be with CLM, and she's now with us at Mars, and she has gotten me addicted to Dunkin' again. So I am drinking an iced coffee with the unsweetened coconut because it feels like summer.
Yeah, and it's like that's like the healthy option. Everyone goes coconut when they go healthy.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Absolutely.
My beverage of choice is unsweetened black or green tea. Yeah. And my jam is a Trenta Starbucks, but I don't live near a Starbucks, so unfortunately I can't get that.
I also really like their nitro cold brew. So if you really have some work to get done in a day, get one of those or two of those and you're good to go.
That's a good one. I'm feeling good. I've had a few. It's 95 degrees here in Eastern Massachusetts where I'm at and where Amitros is located. Where exactly are you in the world?
I am in Des Moines, Iowa, and today it is a lovely 84 degrees. It's actually pretty perfect. There's a little bit of cloud covering, so it feels pretty awesome outside.
I can see sun coming through, and for the viewers listening, you can't see, but there is like a giant white light that's coming down. It looks like an alien spaceship that's going to take me up. But about 12 or 1 o'clock, I get this bright light. So sorry about that, Claire, coming through. But we haven't covered anything about workers' compensation. We've just talked about beverages. But this is a podcast where we're going to focus on the humanity of workers' compensation and talk to a lot of different injured individuals, but also talk about folks like yourself who are part of the workers' compensation services delivery ecosystem and who are stars like yourself. And I will say I've been a super fan of yours for a long time. I followed you on LinkedIn and social media, and you're so incredibly positive. And I feel like, and maybe I'm being a little cynical when I say this, like work comp is kind of stuffy for some people. They think of maybe a claims adjuster stuck behind a desk, and we know it's not that. It's a super dynamic industry. But I guess what would you say is probably the biggest misconception about workers' compensation?
Is that it's black and gray and dreary and that people are out to get injured workers. We're not. At least everywhere that I have worked, we have really tried our best to make good things happen for injured workers. And a lot of times that really is bringing all the parties to the table and taking the time to communicate and make sure that everybody understands the process. Number one, it's not an easy system to understand. The statutes are, they're dated, a little aged. We haven't really done a lot of revamping on any of the states in the past 50, 100 years. And then you have the added stress where employers aren't usually very well educated on it unless they have a designated person. So they are not very well versed in what happens or who does what. And so really, if you can take those communication pieces and really outline everyone's process and procedure and who is responsible for what and establish accountabilities along the way, it can be a much easier system where people do feel taken care of and that people are doing the right thing versus this is just a we're out to get you type system. And I think that's really what a lot of people think of it. And, when you hear family and friends and the influence throughout society and even getting on the streaming services these days, there are always advertisements that pump messaging into this space that make it less glittery and sparkly than it should be. And shame on them because it should be awesome. But I do not have advertising dollars to get on there and just blow glitter everywhere. And
but
say
you know what? Maybe you don't, but I think the work you do, especially around just being a positive force in the industry helps. And that doesn't cost anything. I mean, I suppose it does. You got to pay your internet bill to, hop onto LinkedIn, but it doesn't. But I would say it goes a long way. And I can tell just by the engagement that you're getting and the recognition that you are rightfully owed. that it does go a long way. There's you. Who are some of the other positive folks, like forces in the industry or mentors that you have in workers' compensation?
So I have to say Mark Pugh. He has been probably one of my ride or dies since like 2014. He was one of the first people that helped me he asked me what I wanted to do in this space. Like I'd been an adjuster, I had been a leader, I had run a department, and I was leaving running a department to go into the sales side because I truly believed in the focus on psychosocial issues. And there was a group that really focused on that. So he asked me, he's like, well, what do you want to do? Who do you want to be? And he, to this day, is one of the very best people that will always cut time out for me and is super influential. So I have to say Mark. I also have to say Bob Wilson. I love Bob Wilson. And he is another ride or die where when I needed help with the workers recovery unit, Bob is one of the first people that was like, yes, do this. This is the best idea ever. I wrote about this back in 2011. And I didn't know Bob at the time when we were moving forward with this idea. But then he was just so awesome at helping us promote it. And I don't think we would have ever gotten the recognition without Bob Wilson backing us and really pushing us out into the space when I was currently working with that group. I also have to say my podcast co-host, when I was doing the Adjusted podcast, I was involved in season 1, not in season 2. Yeah. And Greg Hamlin, who is now running season 2 alone, is so wonderful. And he's also a driving force of just fabulousness. That is anything he can possibly do to help people understand the bigger picture that goes into workers' compensation. And I love what he's doing with Adjusted. I love how he is bringing in new names and faces. And I believe this week they're highlighting Kids Chance, which is something that everybody should know about, yet not all of those people at the adjuster level who could make the biggest impact have that knowledge about Kids Chance. So those would be my top 3 at the present.
Oh, you hit on so much stuff. We could spend 2 hours talking about each. I guess I will just say I've known Mark Pugh for quite a few years, and he doesn't know this because I haven't told him, he gave me the courage to grow out my beard. And that was kind of something like folks did during COVID, but he rocked that beard and he owns it and it looks awesome. And I was like, you know what, if Mark can do it, I can pull it off. Mine's certainly not as long as his, but I saw him speak at a conference on the topic of opioid abuse kind of before it was really a thing we were all talking about. And he was discussing alternative treatment modalities. And he was like one of the first that I knew of that brought up medical marijuana as an option. And I just thought, wow, this guy's super brave. He's incredibly articulate and brilliant, but he wasn't afraid to bring up topics because it was just the right thing to discuss. And even though it was a super uncomfortable conversation, I think some folks just didn't have the knowledge base to sort of get what he was saying. I think folks are with him now because the literature is there and folks are more read up on it, but he's totally incredible. And then I'll say kids, I'm so glad you brought up Kids Chance, and it's sort of a shameless plug here. I'm on the board of directors for the Massachusetts chapter. And it's one of the most rewarding things that I've done, and getting to see some of the applicants and kids who are recipients of these scholarships who have gone through such harrowing issues, having their parents either seriously injured or killed. It's the coolest thing in the world. I wish I could do it full time. I wish I could win the lottery and just do Kids Chance all the time, because it's the best thing. And I don't know what your involvement is, Claire.
I'm on the Iowa board.
I just think it's such a fantastic organization. I want to know about you a little bit more.
Sure.
How did you even fall into the workers' compensation industry, or did you find it? Did it find you? I know everyone kind of has their own unique story. Kind of what's your background?
So 2 things on this. So I have been an injured worker twice.
Seriously?
Yeah. So the first time I was 16 years old and I was working at a smoothie shop in Marion, Iowa, because I am bougie, but Mark Walls will laugh because Mark Walls is from Marion, Iowa too. And Sophie and I laugh, but we have our claim to fame of being from rival high schools in Marion, Iowa. So shout out to Mark on that one. I was working at the smoothie shop and we were required to put in a fire safety handle that's probably in between the plate that you would push on a glass door and the bottom of it. And I was walking outside to go show my girlfriend a dress or something that I purchased for a wedding for that weekend, and the door closed right on my leg and literally missed like the artery by,
oh my gosh,
just completely missed it. So not awesome. Had to go to the hospital and get stitches and everything, but I came back to work. Didn't think anything of it. Just, made sure I clocked out while I went and got stitches. Came back in, went right back to work. And then my boss was like, you can go home, but not even thinking about the fact that this was, it could have
Did you have a claim or you just reported the lost time? And
no, I didn't do anything. I was 16 years old and there was like 4 people that worked here. So, when you look at those type of dynamics, my dad was really good friends with the business owner and my dad's health insurance picked everything up. And I ended up getting off work early so I could leave to go to that wedding. So I really thought it was a win-win, not even thinking about, work comp. But so that was kind of funny. And then I had an injury in 2018 where I blew out my hip. So that one was a little bit less fun, but I was carrying a bouquet of flowers. One of our former adjusters her husband had passed away like 5 years before. So the team had rallied together and we got this pretty bouquet of yellow flowers, but it was big enough that I couldn't see when I was walking. And there was a gentleman walking out of his cubicle and I was wearing flats, like the only time I've ever worn flats to the office. And my shoe hit his like steel-toed boot, like in the most perfect way possible, where I fell to the ground. I ended up going to the occupational medical provider, and she's like, "It's like the 1% chance this would be a work injury." So I get the MRI, go see the surgeon, and he's like, "Yep, you were fine before then." And here we go. So I went through that process, and I will tell you, it was absolutely terrible. It was a terrible experience.
And sorry, by that time you were in the claims industry.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So even back up before that. So you go to college, or you like, I want to do risk management.
No, not at all. I was going to be a senator.
You're going to be what?
Senator. I still might be. Who knows? I'm still young. No, I had gone and toured Europe and came back and was bartending at a small town bar in Iowa, in Shoeyville, Iowa, because, I love how people automatically think of Iowa as it's just like farmland. Well, let me just tell you about these small towns that some of us go to. They're probably everything you could ever imagine. However, one of my doubles partner, I played tennis with this girl from age 3 to 17, and her father ran a defense firm for very heavily focused in transportation and workers' compensation transportation defense.
Gotcha.
So he happened to come in that night and said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "I just got back from touring Europe." And he's like, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I need to retake the LSAT because I bombed it, because it was during Iowa homecoming weekend." And, some things took priority. I was in the sorority. So, certain events took place that did not involve studying. It was much more important in those events. So lessons learned on that one. And so he said, before you take the LSAT again, why don't you come work at our firm and see if that's actually what you want to do? Which is a really good idea. Like when I teach at Drake University here in Des Moines, and I love seeing all of the students taking their summers to go experience careers. Like, what would that be? I highly recommend that to anyone, because I wish I would have done that before I graduated college. But, the more you know.
Yeah.
And so I worked there for a year and decided to not take the LSAT again. I ended up getting my master's in public administration and moved to Des Moines and did that through Drake University, and went and worked for a TPA at that time that had a great tuition reimbursement program.
There you go.
And then I stayed and got my specialist, and they helped with that. And off to the races we were in claims.
Wow. So it wasn't a conscious decision to go, I want to go into insurance and risk management. It just sort of.
It literally, I accidentally fell into it.
And so what made you stay? What made you want to continue to keep pursuing various careers in this?
I love the ability to help people. I love that every single day that we come to work, we have the ability to change the trajectory of somebody's life just by listening, by caring, and by helping get them the absolute best services and treatment and anything that we can do to help make a less than desirable space the best it can possibly be. So I have a background of being a foster to adopt kiddo, and I think that system is very similar. I think they're both very gray, and there's a lot of people that don't get to be heard in that space. And so I look at them very parallel for me. And I think it's one of the reasons that I get to be the bright, shiny light in work comp, because I understand what the other sides look like in a lot of different avenues. And at the end of the day, why choose to be anything else but happy? If you're not happy, then go look in the mirror and figure out what your stuff is. And that's where, like, I took a little trip and went into the psychosocial side of work comp for a while. And it was fascinating because, you know, we look at it from the workers' compensation side, but how much of us carry around so much baggage with us all the time? What does that have? Like, how much of that goes on to your kids? And then you think about it, like, I go back and forth between work comp and leadership and personal life and being a parent and all of the spillovers, that they all really go hand in hand. And so when we're working with injured workers now, I want people to start thinking about the bigger aspect where, what do the children see when dad can't go to work and dad starts to have mental health issues because he's not around his people? He doesn't have the camaraderie. He's starting to feel isolated and alone. What do the children see? So when we talk about how important the adjusting role is, it's not just the injured worker or the injured worker and the spouse. It's the children that see them, the neighbors that are not being able to be communicated with in the same way. It's just such a bigger landscape than people have ever given it credit for. And while I realize, like, I want the entire industry to change, I'm only going to be able to push it so far. And then I need these next generations that are fueled by meaning and purpose to come behind and help really reinforce it. That it is so much bigger than a checkbox, ouch, I hurt my shoulder. It's a shoulder injury. We're going to isolate it there. No, we have to really look at things from a holistic perspective and not even just the impact it has on that one person, but what do those social determinants of health look like the entire family that's involved?
It's huge. I agree with that 100%. I couldn't agree with you more. I was involved in the Medicare set aside on the vendor side, you know, delivering Medicare set asides to claims adjusters when they were getting ready to settle a case. And the injured worker was, unfortunately, in my role, it was kind of this voiceless, faceless individual. They were a claim number, and you'd read about these horrific accidents, and you wouldn't really get a glimpse into their life. And it got to a point where, you know, it wasn't the number one driving force, but I was at the point where I came to Ametros because I wanted to help. I wanted to help people. I wanted to make a difference, and I felt that altruistic sort of feeling, and I knew I could make an impact. And when I got here, I was overwhelmed at what I saw, and both sad just because I finally got to see the full impact that a work injury can have, but also totally blown away at the resilience that people have and their support network that they have, especially spouses and kids, how they totally rally around, forego their educational goals or forego. That's why I love Kids Chance so much, because it helps those folks, but they'll do anything to help their family member who's hurt. And some of the stories that we're gonna tell on It's Settled on our podcast talk about sort of the harrowing things those folks have gone through and the impact that it's had, to your point, Claire, not only on that person who hurt their back or was in that car accident, but what it did to their spouse and to their kids too. So I'm with you so much on the support that we have to provide. And I think there's a lot more that folks in the work comp delivery services space can do to support those folks. I don't have all the answers on that, but I know that we can probably go further. But I want to hit on something really quick because it's near and dear to me, and I've read a lot about it, and I've even written a little bit about it. I don't have great answers for it, but you talked about the next generation of workers' comp professionals. How the hell do we recruit and retain? Because we're losing talent like crazy, especially boomer claims adjusters who are going to go on their way and retire. What do we do?
Well, I'm going to be very blunt. First of all, anyone in the C-suite that is not mentoring right now, you should start immediately, because there has been a massive void of C-suite executives in all aspects of insurance that have been, quote unquote, too busy to mentor the next generation. And I can tell you this firsthand, because during some of my doctoral research, I got to interview 42 of them that all told me that they were too busy to do mentoring. So I see you, I hear you, I'm calling your bluff, because we should never be too busy to invest in the people that are going to come after us. I feel it is our duty for anyone that is ever in a leadership role, and this isn't just specific to the insurance industry, this should be anybody that's a leader ever should always find ways that they can develop anybody that is not seated next to them or even with their peers. It's our job to turn around and bring people with us because that is part of leadership. And if you aren't one of those people, then maybe you shouldn't be in leadership.
Yeah.
So when we look at why this whole generational gap has occurred, one, I believe that we didn't invest in people. And I think that's evident when you look at individual development plans of employees. There are so many organizations that don't have that for the employees. And if they do, they're like 3-question surveys that have no merit or meaning. Like, where do you actually develop somebody and how do you show them that they have a career path? And I love Amitros for this because you guys have the lattice. And that is such an awesome, awesome term. But you showcase the development of your team. And that's why I think you guys are such a thriving young organization. It's wonderful to see. In addition to that, we've got to figure out on how we talk. And I think words and communication are so important because when we see this messaging and all of the stuff that I just talked about earlier on how it's pumped into the space, I don't feel that way about my job. I had a couple of students at Drake actually that are going into the claims arena, and I loved it because I was so excited. I'm like, you guys are going into claims? And they said, well, you said you can help people and that it actually pays well and we can get some help tuition wise. And I was like, yes, you guys heard me. This is wonderful. But how we go talk about our jobs and what we do matters. Like if you go ask my daughter what I do, she's going to say, well, my mom helps make good things happen for people. She's no more than that, but that's what she thinks that my job is. When people get hurt, it is my job to help them get better and get them back to their families, get them back to their life. And then they get back to work and they're back to being functional, contributing members of society. So how we've talked about our jobs or career paths, our kids and all of those that are younger than us, listen. And a lot of times when I was actually asking students, I'm like, tell me what you guys think about the insurance space. And they automatically think that you're chained to a desk and there's no flexibility. Well, thank you, COVID, because guess what? Now everybody should be able to work anywhere.
Yep.
And I understand the collaboration of bringing people together, but it doesn't have to be that rigidness. And I think that's one of the other deterring factors of this space is that it manifests in this very rigid, rules-oriented system where I like to look at it as it's not. It's actually quite flexible. The rules make up the foundation of how we operate, and then you get to come in and add your flair, your personality, the diversity, and everything that you bring that makes you be your authentic self. That's what I want on my team to come help work with people because you know what? We're all different shapes, sizes, backgrounds, everything. And that's what I want you to think and bring your brain and start thinking outside of the box. We are advancing medically at a rapid pace. So we need thought leaders that are coming in that have that AI and the technical background in that space. One of the other reasons I think that we've seen this talent gap is that we have historically promoted terribly. We have not promoted people leaders. We've never educated on emotional intelligence. And then we don't hold people accountable on the emotional intelligence and empathy stance. We end up faulting people on that or calling them soft or weak or whatever you want to say, when really the strongest people I know are the smartest emotionally intelligent people. And they have been very charismatic in their leadership and they have big backings and followings because they understand things in a grander scope. So instead of promoting the technically efficient people that understand rules, regulations, and statutes, congratulations, you're not handling claims anymore. Yeah. You're now leading teams of people or leading people who are leading teams of people. And you have no idea how to try and message vision or any type of camaraderie to move a company or an organization forward because all you know is the New York statute and the 49 different ways you can get fined or forms that need to be filed. Right. But you can't get people 2 or 3 levels down below you to come along with you because you don't understand. One of the worst leaders I've ever worked for sent every single email, high importance. How are you supposed to decipher between? You just sent me 100 emails telling me
everything's a fire. Yeah.
Was not a big fan of subrogation. That was not my world, but we dabbled in it.
So these are big systemic issues that you're hitting on. I mean, and I know, no, I don't think anyone has all the answers, but like, how do we even start? I mean, you mentioned mentoring is one thing and having buy-in and participation at the C-suite mentoring. I think that's fantastic. Have you seen large claims organizations start mentorship programs where they're roping in the C-suite folks?
So I can't speak to large organizations. I can tell you that Mark Pugh and I and your former CEO, Marcus, all decided to come together and start our own, where we built this transitions group that saw the need. And then we decided to build our own mentoring program, because I'm a big fan of, if it doesn't exist, if you do not do something, you're part of the problem. So we built a mentoring program. I know Rising Insurance Star Executives with Amy Cooper's group, Amy Cooper from Gallagher Bassett, they have a mentoring program. I know CPCU is doing a mentoring program. So now it becomes, all right, so the organizations might not have embraced it on their own. So these different pockets of people are starting to just build them themselves because of the need. So people will go outsourcing looking for that. But I do think at the end of the day, if you don't have that type of leadership built into your organization, it's got to start coming. I mean, it really has to. I think that it's being demanded now from everyone. But when I, again, talk to the students, they want meaning and purpose. And that's technically what everybody wants. But really, how do we get there effectively? And how do we get everyone bought in? I think it has to be a lead by example. Yeah. And then it's really holding each other accountable as we move along this space.
Why do you think historically the insurance industry in general has been reflected back to the public is sort of this stodgy, stuffy, old dusty claim files and kind of folks that don't have a heart? And I know it's not that. And I know we're talking about where we want it to go, but why has that been? And I guess maybe even the other question is, why has work comp in particular been so behind? Because you're talking about stuff, I think, that's going to be in like organizational textbooks in probably 10 years. And everyone will go, okay, look, well, why didn't we talk about this in the comp industry when we had that, huge employment gap in 2025 or something like that, and we had no claims adjusters, and we tried to move everything to utilize technology to automate everything, and then we realized, the human element went away and we lost business.
Well, if you look at the breakdown of the insurance industry, why has it taken us so long to look at diversity, equity, and inclusion? Yeah. So when we talk about having thought leadership, like I seriously love Bob Wilson so much, because he's like, Claire came in and executed and implemented this. But it was one of those things that I had to have the backing by all of those guys to be able to do any of this to begin with. And so it creates a very interesting perspective where, who buys insurance? All people need to buy insurance. So why is our industry so not representative of the population that it serves? Yeah. And so I think this is one of those times that if we don't start paying attention now, I mean, I don't know what else you need to do. I've been doing this speech for the past year and a half, ever since I did my dissertation work, because it really showcased not only the fact that we had very few millennials and pretty much no traces of Gen Z, but then to also look at the ethnicity breakdown and the background breakdown, and to figure out the male to female ratios and the male to female ratios in the C-suites and the decision makers and whatnot. So I think a lot of the lack of the embracing is the fact that we failed as an industry to really embrace the population that we serve. We are not represented to it. And I think this is also maybe true for the financial services industry too.
I think so.
But so what do you do now? Like, this is where it is a hot topic, and organizations can't turn a blind eye to it anymore.
Yeah, we're at an inflection point for sure.
But that would be my guess. Honestly, when you look at the breakdown, and I want to go back to, these are all statistics, and this is all very data driven, and it is out there for anyone to be able to find.
I think so too. Tell me a little bit about your doctoral studies, and sure. Like, what was your concentration? What was your dissertation focus on?
Sure. So my doctoral focus is organizational leadership with an emphasis on organizational development. I really wanted to know the breakdown between generations. If what kept my father engaged was what would keep me engaged. And my dad worked in a rock quarry, actually. He still does. He'll never retire. He refuses to. And he's like 75 at this point. 76 this year.
Wow.
And he he's been running an unloader since he was 18. And I just never understood like why, and he's so engaged in what he does. Like he, in working in stone quarries, I know that we have a pretty big construction group in workers' compensation space where it's high hazard, high risk.
Actually. Is he still physical in it, or is he more like logistics, or is he like actually down there? Wow.
So the getting in and out of a truck, he's had a hip and 2 knees replaced. And, it is what it is. But I wanted to know if we actually want the same thing from a motivational standpoint, which motivation and engagement are not the same thing.
Yeah.
But I wanted to know what it really was. And so when I originally looked at doing this study, I wanted to focus on my dad's company, and that didn't work out. They didn't want anything too close to home. And then I looked at Bridgestone, and then one of my girlfriends left, who was the HR rep. And then I looked at John Deere because I still wanted to stay in that manufacturing sector.
Yep.
And then when I looked at the tool that I wanted to use, it's called the psychological engagement measure. It was actually done in the insurance industry back in 2004. You know what? This is going to work. Let's try it in the insurance industry. And the breakdown was fascinating. It was fascinating to be able to see that everybody really was looking for the same thing. They wanted meaning and purpose in their daily lives of being able to come into work and do something that actually aggregates to a higher good. And insurance does that. Insurance restores the livelihoods of people. And so regardless of what position you hold in an insurance organization, as long as you understand how it plays into the bigger picture of life, people tend to be pretty engaged.
That is a profound quote. Insurance restores the livelihood of people. I've found at Amitros, where we deal with the administration of post-settlement medical funds after they've settled their case, that folks just want to feel human. And it sounds super cheesy and simplistic, but they just want to be acknowledged. They want to be treated fairly. They don't want, preferential treatment, but they want to feel dignified. And one thing that I kind of just missed in the work I was doing, which is more on the technical legal side, was that, a person, when they're severely injured, they're not working anymore. And that takes away something from them. And you said something, insurance restores the livelihood of people. We're really looking to help people at the end of the day. And I think you might have said it, but I think that is an element that will likely attract younger talent. And I'm not an expert on, generational psychology, but it seems like younger folks, Gen Z and millennials, that seems to be important. I'm a Gen Xer. It's important to me. I think it's important to all people. But how do we, as work comp champions, how do we promote that other than just trumpeting it? But how do we get that out there more?
So I think there's a couple things that we can do. Number one, we've got to start getting into the universities and almost into high schools. If you look at some of the other industries, they are in school curriculum at a very early age. So when people are looking at, every child, I think at some point wants to be a teacher and something like that. Yeah, because they see that on a consistent basis and they know that that's an occupation that's available. So is being a firefighter. So is being a police
astronaut, an attorney, a doctor. Yep.
All of the basic ones that they are showcased or seen on a regular basis. And so I think it is really trying to come in early and getting them to understand how you can really play all of these, wear all these different hats and play these different roles in this space. But then also, I think we have to go at it differently. We focus very heavily right now on going after risk management and insurance professionals and the schools that have those type of programming, where really, I think we need to be going after, like in workers' compensation specifically, I want the sociology majors, I want the psychology majors, I want the communication studies, because let's talk about how to effectively communicate in the different mediums that are going to be available and that need to be on a regular reference or a cadence that make things where AI does work for us in these spaces. Let's get some of the tech kids in to help us work more with the psychosocial issues. And when somebody is starting to flounder a little bit, we're able to identify it immediately and provide them with resources instantaneously. not after having 48 hours of returned phone calls. So also like the criminal justice ones, if we're going to go down the investigative routes, anyone that's looking to do legal, I mean, there are so many different avenues that exist within our space. I think how we go to approach and educate in high schools and in universities or colleges that are available is to really showcase that there are all of these different elements that go into our work environment. Or even if you want to look at marketing, like marketing is, if you have an arts, like I would love to do the marketing thing if I could redo that again. But there's just so many different elements. And I think that we have kind of pigeonholed where we were going to go look for talent, that we never really embraced the looking at like the bigger scope of everything that we do to be able to showcase to others, hey, you want to go into psychology? All right, get your psychology degree and then come work for me. Because let's talk through exactly like what people are going through. Help me understand the psychosis of what they're sitting in, and how returning somebody to work actually ends up not only helping the employer, but it helps the injured worker and the family. And why does this work this way? Or what makes people tick? How do you help figure that out when you're having these conversations? Because, you know, we've historically trained people that, oh, you have to call that injured worker, get that recorded statement immediately, and then you run through this checkbox mentality versus really restoring the art of conversation. If you're a good adjuster, you should be able to draw all of that out without having to do, please state your name. Please verify your social security number. Are you married? Do you have any children? Please state your address. And going through like the boom, 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 boom. You can have like, hey, I just want to verify this information. Can you tell me what happened on June 6th? Help me understand. And really trying to craft an artwork around that. And I think the more that we're able to showcase that this really is an artsy environment, but you also have to have leaders that agree with having the outside the box thinking. When we're working with human beings, and again, I think this is very specific to workers' compensation, we're not replacing a window or a door or a roof. We're actually restoring the livelihood of a human being who's been damaged versus it being like a house or a physical structure of some kind. So having somebody be able to understand and elicit the emotions or understand the emotional components that go into that, that creates an outside the box thinking of how are we going to approach this with this person. They are not all cookie cutter clones. Just because you handled one shoulder injury, like you having a shoulder injury versus me, are going to have very different outcomes. Obviously, because you're so healthy and youthful, and I am like grandma over here with the hip injury. But there's just so many things that go into it that we have to make sure that leadership is empowering people at the adjusting desk to be able to think outside the box so that we can bring in AI that will help the adjusters be better at understanding who they are working with and the why.
Well, I was going to talk to you about that a little bit too. And I'm an attorney by trade. Actually, before that, like you talked about artsy, I went to Berklee College of Music. Like my background is in music. I thought I was going to be a rock star when I was a kid. I have tattoos. Looks like you have tattoos as well. I'm not ashamed of it. And I found a lot of very effective folks in the claims industry have an artistic background. Maybe it's in music, maybe it's in performing art, maybe it's in studio or visual art. What's that? I
have a degree in dance. So I'm
nice.
More on the aesthetic arts. But
nice.
Yeah.
My wife is a dance professor, has her undergrad and graduate in MFA in performing arts as well. And I'm a huge advocate of the arts. I think you were talking about emotional intelligence. The folks that I know who are incredibly effective in just in the business world in general, it really connecting with people and being authentic, typically have some sort of bent in art or performing art. And I think it helps. And I think you're 100% right in not only your comments about diversity and inclusion, but also in the diversity of landscape in our academic areas and in selecting and recruiting folks from a wide landscape of academic backgrounds versus going, oh, that's the risk management person, that's the accountant, let's bring them in and have them deal with people all day. Because they might not be wired for that. And it might be square peg round hole, where they are robotically going through, doing a recorded statement and talking to someone like they're a claim number versus a human being who just went through a really traumatic event, who's scared, who's angry at their employer, or maybe not, or they're just going through all this turmoil, and really connecting with them to get them back wherever they need to go versus treating them like they're a thing that happened, like an event, and not a real person. Anyway.
And it's making the information consumable. One of the very last people that I hired when I was at the Workers Recovery Unit was a girl who could articulate Medicaid in one of the most fabulous ways ever, because I didn't understand Medicaid. So I asked her during the interview process, so tell me about Medicaid. And the way that she was able to describe it was so perfect. I was like, go ahead. Yeah, we're going to go hire you. That was great. Because if you can make Medicaid that easily consumable, we'll go ahead and bring you into comp and do the same thing here. And she's moved on and is now doing subrogation, but she did a fabulous job of just being able to make sure people could understand what was going on. And she talked about it in a way of like, when you are really trying to look at who you are fixing a need for, you have to meet them at their level. And that isn't like an education level, but that's a level of, are you talking to somebody a half an hour after they were injured? Or are we 2 weeks out now? They haven't heard from anybody. They're missing a paycheck. What kind of emotional state are you getting someone in? Because she had described this as when they're looking for Medicaid benefits, where are they along this process? Because that's going to tell you a lot on how they're going to be able to show up for you. And I think one of the most powerful things that an adjuster can do is to ask the injured worker. One, I think it's imperative that we start text messaging when the claim is filed. Hey, we've got your claim. I'm your claims adjuster. If you need anything immediately, here's my number. Otherwise, I will give you a call in the next 24 hours to start running through what you qualify for. We need to be using AI in those type of capacities to let people start establishing expectations to avoid the fear of the unknown. I just wrote an article on this last week on workerscompensation.com, but fear of the unknown, understanding worry in workers' compensation.
I read it. It was fantastic.
Thank you. But that's where we really got to start focusing on what kind of emotional state are you getting people in? Did they just have treatment denied because the state wasn't going to approve it? Or what does that look like when you're looking at things from a landscape? And I loved meeting Desiree. It was Desiree Brown. She's a fantastic person, works for WR Berkeley. She was so good at just understanding who she was going to be talking with, that's an art element in itself.
Sure.
It's just setting people up for expectations and knowing that emotions might be high. And we can't fix what's done on the employer side, no matter if you sit on the TPA side or you sit on the carrier side. The employer doesn't get us the claim. We're already coming, late to the game, ill-prepared, and we can't really fix it, but we can start by establishing accountabilities and expectations for all parties so that everybody has to bring their seat to the table and bring whatever we need so that we can effectively move forward. And that's where a lot of it it's so much communication. And so there's so much, you can't be lazy in this space. You've got to be proactive and you have to want to be here. If you don't like being in this space, then I really wish people would just go, because we should all be wanting to come here and make good things happen for people. It's one of the most loving spaces that I've ever felt, like where the work comp industry as a whole, the people that are here and that are those people that we look at as mentors, really believe that we are trying to make the system better. We're going out and talking to legislatures to try and make the state laws more effective so that we can get people back and restored to their daily lives. We've got, I know that like every vendor company is getting bought up at this moment, but the customer service element, it is all about the customer experience. And who is that customer? Customer really at the end of the day he's going to be that injured worker, because the faster you get an injured worker back into their life environment, it takes care of everybody else along the way. And I wish people would start realizing that and really understanding that how at the root of all of this should be that injured worker. It's kind of like when parents get divorced, put the child, the child should always be the most important. In the work comp system, we tend to break things apart and that, we've got to do what the employer says. Okay, focus on that injured worker first, and the rest of these pieces will fall into play. It's just, I don't know. I feel like it's common sense, but apparently it hasn't been for 107 years, 120.
I want to get your thoughts a little bit on technology. And again, I'm a lawyer by trade. I'm not a super technologically advanced person. I have read a little bit about one of the areas to fill the gap in talent and work comp is to inject it with technology. And I get a little bit scared about it, but you've raised a couple, you raised an AI solution. You also even just talked about basic forms of communication, like implementing text messages. Mm-hmm. What are some other ways that we can, as an industry, leverage technology in this new injured worker centric paradigm?
So I think we really need to focus on where we can shift the most so that adjusters can do what they need to do. They need to be the people elements of this space. And so when we look at all of the state forms, so I'm going to use New York for an example, 49 different forms. Use some technology to make that stuff easier. And I think that a lot of this actually is a call out to the states too. I mean, there are still states that require paper form filing. So, I mean, really, it is everybody coming to the table. Adjusters should be doing what they need to do to have that human element. Because again, if we aren't going to go down this road of really trying to be a human being to a human being, we might as well just replace us all with robots. And I hate that because I don't believe that this space should ever do that. What I think we need to do is arm adjusters with effective tools. Like when a claim comes in, there's an immediate notification that goes out to the employer, letting them know it was received and who it was assigned to. And then a text and an email or whatever the injured worker wants, because they should be able to choose their methods of communication. And newsflash to people that aren't believing me on this tech space, the younger generations aren't that great at picking up the phone if you haven't noticed yet.
Yeah.
Send them a TikTok and you might get a response, or a Snapchat, you might get a response. But newsflash of what's coming, they don't want to wait for phone calls. They're going to scream. But if we had instant notifications and we used technology and those proficiencies to try and help the adjuster so that all the paperwork and the minutia that makes the job not fun gets automated, or using technology in ways that are effective for them to be more successful, that's where you're going to see the biggest lift. And I think you're going to see adjusters like their jobs more. So when we look at the whole science, there are 4 happiness hormones that if you actually participate in an advocacy-based model, it actually will boost your own happiness levels within you as an adjuster. And if leaders aren't focusing on those elements at this point, then I don't know where else to go with that. I just feel like we should all be doing the right thing, focusing on how we can get people back into their life. And the rest of it really does take care of itself, because people who feel like they're being taken care of are less likely to take advantage of the system.
Yeah. As we sort of round things out, tell me about your current role. What are you doing right now? What are some of the initiatives you're working on in this role?
Sure. So I am now the Vice President of Workers' Compensation at NARS. So all the TPA side of the house now versus being on the carrier side in my prior life. So it's really taking over. I wanted to build a center of excellence, and I love Robert and Jamie. They're the owners of NARS, and they really have given this beautiful runway of build the first work comp center of excellence. So I'm doing that with an amazing team. We just took on Michelle Green and Tina Perney, and there are some amazing leaders that are coming in to really help game change. So we've taken on the carrier side, which is great because the carrier side is all their own money. The TPA side is not.
Yes.
And so this is a way bigger opportunity to educate captives, to educate employers, the self-insured, the large deductible, to really help them understand how much their culture matters and how we can do all of this, but we also can help you in this process. So we're focusing really heavily on building strategic partnerships with people who understand the injured worker needs to be number one. This has to be customer experience for that injured worker. It has to be the best of the best in an elite capacity. Number two, it's got to be easy for adjuster use too. It has to be the easiest thing for an adjuster to make sure that they can focus on their job of the human elements. And then the third is, if you do these things, claim costs go down. It's fascinating. It's amazing, do the right thing for people. They go back to work. They're happier, their lives, they move on with their life because they've been fixed and life is good. But it doesn't always go that way. So we're really trying to build the best resources for a team that can show up every day loving what they do and making a difference in people's lives, because that is their focal point. When they come into work, it is really get in there, start talking to your injured workers, and let's figure out what we need for them to be successful on their road to recovery. And this has to be felt through every level of a leadership organization, from the adjusting desk all the way up, because otherwise it doesn't work. I mean, that was proven by the rising benchmarking studies. So 2016, it was like 60% of organizations said they had an advocacy model. And then in 2019, they go ask the adjusters and they're like, what's an advocacy model? Okay, so we've got some breakdowns in communication. So that's why it's so important that whether you're an adjuster, a supervisor, a manager, a director, a VP, an SVP, a president, a CEO, Everybody's got to be in alignment with where you're going, what you're doing, the language you use. I hate the C word. The C word is like the most atrocious word on the face of the earth. Claim it. But you've got to have the same language, and you have to have the same focal point where these are not bad people. Yes, we all have claims that are less than desirable, but put yourself in that injured worker's shoes. What happened at work? What was the camaraderie like? Were they seen, heard, and acknowledged? What happened in the aftermath? What happened in their home life as a result of it? There's just so many things that go into it, and how leadership talks, listens, and builds around what is being communicated back to them. It's got to be a coaching up and coaching down. Like, everyone's got to work together. And when it does, it's a beautiful, beautiful situation.
So I went on, totally changing gears. I went on a hike with a mentor of mine. His name's Randall Day. I've known him for over a decade. And we were way up in New Hampshire. And I don't know if you hike, but we're out in the middle of nowhere, 5 miles in, and you end up talking about the most random things in the world. And I don't know how your name came up, but your name came up. And I adore Randall. He's an incredible person. He's been in the comp space for a long, long time. And your name came up, and he talked about how positive you are. And I'm like, oh, totally. I know her. And that's what got me to invite you to the podcast. And I have to say, you, Dr. Claire Muselman, are one of the most positive, amazing people in this space. And it's an absolute privilege to have gotten to sit down with you and talk to you for an hour here. So it's settled. You were on our podcast. We appreciate it very much. And I hope to have you back again.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us for this episode of It's Settled, the Amitros podcast. For more information and episodes, you can visit us at our website at amitros.com. That's ametros.com. Or head over to iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. We hope you enjoyed this episode and look forward to sharing more stories of people overcoming their workplace accidents and bodily injury claims, and those who are working hard to make a difference for them. So it's settled. We'll see you next time.